I was just another person in society. Not very significant, just one of the crowd. But my life quickly changed when the Nazis took power in the 1930s, because I'm Jewish. We weren't very traditional Jews, and we tried to live on as if nothing was going on, and we weren't in danger. But one day, when I came home from school, my parents were standing outside the house with 2 Nazi soldiers. I felt the butterflies of fear take off in my stomach. When I reached the house, they grabbed us and shoved us into the back of their truck. We were driven away from our home, the place that held all of our memories. There were a lot of people crammed together in the small truck, which made it uncomfortable to move around. The truck traveled for many days. The weather was brutal, and the hunger, thirst, and confined living spaces were torturous. Finally, the truck lurched to an abrupt halt, and the doors were flung open, revealing a platform that was lit by reflectors. Behind the platform, we could see dead bodies everywhere, and what seemed to be walking skeletons. We were all unloaded from the truck, and great confusion followed as we were sorted into groups based on questions asked by the SS men. My father was separated from my mother and I screamed after him as we were pulled in opposite directions. After he had disappeared, I hugged my mother tight, and we cried in fear, knowing that we may never see him again. My mother and I were brought to a room with many other women and children. All of our belongings were taken, even our clothes and shoes. Little did we know that the process of destroying us had already begun. After a brief shower, we were given new clothes and shoes. Everyone got the same black and white stripes, with the only difference being the patch on the chest determining our crime. Then there were people who poked at us with needles that produced ink on our skin. The ink formed numbers. They said we would no longer be called by our names, but by our numbers. My number was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We were finally allowed to go to our bunks. It was a small space with shelf-like beds. It was nothing like my bed at home, and there was no room for anything but our frail bodies. After that, life went on. We went to work every day and were offered only small rations of food. Blisters formed on my feet from the uncomfortable wooden shoes we had to wear, and I limped everywhere. The Nazis were cruel. They would beat people to death right in front of us. Slowly, I felt myself slipping away, as my body fell into the usual routines of Auschwitz. I had little sleep because we were always working. Even if it found me just for a second, I would wake in fear of the beatings of the Nazis or other prisoners of higher ranking. There was also very little food to eat, and a lot of people died of starvation. My mother began to lose hope. She saw no real reason to stay alive. She was already dead inside. The Nazis took everything away from us. My father, our possessions, our lives. We belonged to them. We were no longer our own. I watched my mother as her soul was slowly depleted by the hard work and the Nazi torture. I knew she wouldn't be able to last much longer like this. One day, we were brought to the shower room, but what we weren't told was that it was actually a gas chamber. We stood there in the freezing room all night, awaiting our deaths, with no fear at all. But in the morning, they let us out, because they had run out of gas. I suddenly realized that I needed to stay alive. I needed to escape. We needed to escape. My mother seemed to also register that we needed to get out. I think after that night in the gas chamber, something clicked, and her will to live had returned. We suffered many months after, but our outlook on life had changed. We knew the only way to get out alive was to follow the rules and regulations and not get on the bad side of any of the guards. We still had small rations and cramped living spaces, but we never complained. Finally, our suffering was ended when the soldiers of the Soviet Union in the First Army of the Ukraine Front marched into camp and liberated us. It was the happiest day of my life. My mother and I ran to the platform where we had seen my father for the last time before entering camp. I searched frantically around for him, but he was nowhere in sight. Then suddenly, when I was about to give up, I heard a voice call my name. It was my father. I ran to him with my mother close behind. When I reached him, I hugged him tight, and I didn't want to let go. All 3 of us stood there for 5 or 10 minutes, crying and hugging. We were very lucky to all be together. All around us stood the parentless children, spouseless men and women, and others who had lost siblings or friends. I know that we were very lucky, and that all of us should not have survived, and to this day I am very thankful. Even though I am safe now, nightmares and images of the walking skeletons and dead bodies still haunt me. I will never fully recover, but now I will just live with it. It took me a long time to get to where I am today, and the whole experience changed my life. I am hopeful that nothing like this will ever happen again, and that all humans will learn to love each other. Thank you for listening to my story, and may the memory of the Holocaust never die with its victims.